East London. Inside the Ford works at Dagenham, a small track machine clatters off the line and onto the concrete floor. It's barely longer than a car, about 12 feet from nose to tail, just 5 feet high, and weighing under 4 tons. Its armor is thin, no more than 7 to 10 millimeters, enough to deflect stray fragments and distant rifle fire, but little else. Under the hull sits a familiar heart, a Ford Flathead V8, the same engine humming through civilian traffic just beyond the factory gates. 3 men usually crew it. Sometimes more squeeze in, shoulder to shoulder, inside an open steel box with no roof, no turret, and no real protection to speak of. At the front, a single Bren gun sits on a simple mount. That's the whole package. At first glance, it doesn't look like a weapon of war. It looks improvised, like someone bolted tracks onto a bathtub and hoped for the best. Officials labeled it a utility vehicle. The men expected to ride in it had less polite descriptions. It was too small to be a proper tank. Too thin-skinned to take a hit. Too lightly armed to face anything heavier than infantry. And yet, this unlikely machine would go on to fight everywhere. North Africa, Burma, Normandy, even the frozen expanses of the Eastern Front. It would be built across 5 countries, fielded by more than 30 armies, and produced in numbers that dwarfed every tank, armored car, and half-track the Allies ever deployed. Over 113,000 of them. No other armored fighting vehicle has ever come close. Officially, it was the universal carrier. To the men who lived with it, fought from it, and cursed it daily, it was simply the Bren Carrier. So why build something like this at all? To answer that, you have to rewind to the 1920s. The First World War had made one thing painfully clear: infantry moving on foot were dangerously exposed. Tanks could smash through defenses, but they were expensive, slow to build, and far too few to support every unit. What the British Army needed wasn't another tank. It needed something smaller. Cheaper. Something that could carry men, guns, and ammunition across fire-swept ground without leaving them completely exposed. A vehicle that wasn't a tank, but could move like one. The idea began modestly, almost experimentally. In 1925, a Royal Engineers officer, Major Gifford Lequesne Martel, built a tiny one-man tracked vehicle in his garage and demonstrated it to the War Office. It caught attention. Engineers John Carden and Vivian Lloyd took the concept further, developing a series of compact track machines powered by simple automotive engines. Their designs evolved into the Carden-Lloyd tankettes, small, export-friendly vehicles that spread across Europe and beyond. But they were too cramped, too limited for real combat. So the concept grew. Through the 1930s came a succession of specialized carriers, machine gun carriers, scout carriers, cavalry carriers, each designed for a specific role. By the eve of war, the British Army realized it was overcomplicating things. 4 vehicles doing 4 jobs could be replaced by one machine that did all of them. That decision produced the Universal Carrier in 1940. The name wasn't an exaggeration. The design was brutally practical. An open-topped steel hull, wider at the front and narrowing toward the rear. The engine sat in the middle, producing about 85 horsepower, enough to push the carrier to 30 miles per hour on roads and keep it moving at speed across rough terrain. Driver on the left. Gunner on the right. Everyone else squeezed wherever there was space. It steered through a controlled differential system, with braking for tighter turns. Its suspension, simple but effective, gave it a surprisingly smooth ride over ground that would rattle heavier machines apart. Range? Around 150 miles under good conditions. Protection? Minimal. But that was never the point. Its standard weapon was the Bren gun, but that was just the beginning. With small modifications, it could carry heavier machine guns, anti-tank rifles, mortars, even flamethrowers. Some towed artillery. Others hauled radios, ammunition, or wounded soldiers. It wasn't designed to win battles. It was designed to make sure the infantry could. And when war came, it proved its worth immediately. In 1940, during the Battle of France, the British Expeditionary Force deployed over 2,000 carriers. They ferried machine gun teams forward, evacuated casualties under fire, and delivered ammunition to places wheeled vehicles couldn't reach. As German forces broke through and the retreat to Dunkirk began, carriers were among the last machines still moving, small, fast, and just reliable enough to keep going when everything else failed. In North Africa, they came into their own. Racing across open desert, they delivered troops and supplies at speeds the enemy struggled to counter. They became the connective tissue of the army, moving water, ammunition, and men across terrain that punished heavier vehicles. By D-Day in 1944, carriers were rolling ashore alongside the first waves. Modified for amphibious landings, they pushed inland with machine guns and anti-tank weapons while infantry was still pinned on the beaches. In the dense hedgerows of Normandy, flamethrower variants, known as wasps, turned them into something far more intimidating. German troops quickly learned to recognize the sound of one approaching, and often surrendered before it even came into view. They fought in jungles, mountains, deserts, and snow. In Burma, they navigated terrain that would stop larger vehicles cold. In Italy, they climbed narrow mountain roads. On the Eastern Front, thousands supplied under Lend-Lease served with the Red Army. On paper, other vehicles looked better. The American M3 half-track, for example, carried more men and mounted heavier weapons. But the Universal Carrier had advantages that mattered more. It was smaller, lighter, easier to build, and far cheaper. Its engine came straight from civilian production lines. Its design was simple enough to be manufactured almost anywhere. Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand all produced them in huge numbers. Quantity became its own kind of strength. Even after the war, it didn't disappear. It showed up in conflicts from the Middle East to Southeast Asia, adapted and reused long after more sophisticated machines had faded away. Production finally ended in 1960. By then, over 113,000 had been built. Today, a few survive in museums, some still running, their engines echoing a design that refused to become obsolete. Because despite everything it lacked, armor, firepower, protection, it worked. It worked in Libya's deserts, in Normandy's hedgerows, in Burma's jungles, in the frozen East. It carried guns, ammunition, radios, and wounded men. It did whatever was asked of it, wherever it was needed. It wasn't impressive. It wasn't glamorous. But it was everywhere. And that's what made it indispensable.